Good morning again. It's a week on from the last video. I did get a little bit done on Wednesday night. It's Saturday morning now, about 9 in the morning. Some parts have arrived. I'm actually waiting for 2 litres of new brake fluid arriving. That could come later this morning, or if it comes during the week. I suppose that's not the end of the world really. I haven't yet been able to get the accumulator off yet, but what I might do is put the breaker bar in the hands of my long-suffering wife, and maybe she can do that and I'll hold it and we can get it broken and removed. I have, however, managed to get the hub assembly back together. This didn't prove difficult at all, actually. It's just well, basically pressed. Well, it's not even pressed together, it's just reassembled. It's very user-friendly. I've come across 2 different techniques or methods to put the hub nut back in. I think the official Jaguar way talks about measuring end float, and you need a gauge for that, which I haven't got. The other way I've seen is somebody who's tightened the hub nut while spinning the disc constantly to make sure that the bearings properly seat themselves, so they're not slightly askew. So continuously turn the hub and the disc whilst tightening to 25 foot-pounds of torque, but making sure that the bearings don't sort of snatch up. I tried that, but it really did snatch up, so I've backed off again from that quite some way. So there's absolutely no float in it now. It's not like it was, well, I say there's no float. There's no obvious wiggle in the bearing like there was before, but I can still turn it. It doesn't spin quite as freely, but I don't have an awful lot of experience with this particular type of wheel bearing, but the drag on the bearing feels about right compared to modern cars. So I hope I've got that right, and if not, well, it's about 20-25 quid for a new bearing set, so it's actually not the end of the world at all. I found getting the caliper back on was a little bit of a 3D puzzle, but I've got there in the end. The reason for that I'll show you in just a second, but I'm going to turn the camera around to do that. Right, so hopefully all of this can be seen. What we have down here on this assembly is the track rod end and the track rod going to the steering rack. And then we've got the knuckle. The knuckle is a big iron casting, which at the bottom, first of all, it's separate from the hub. It can be unbolted. Oops, sorry, I'll try not to wobble the camera and give everyone seasickness. This lower bolt bolts through the caliper and into the upright. But then higher up, we've got another bolt in here, which hopefully I'm just about pointing at, which holds the caliper to the upright. But then over here, am I getting this just in there? This is a continuation of the steering knuckle. And that one, the caliper bolts through the knuckle into the upright. So basically what I'm trying to articulate is that looking at it in plane with the disc, as I'm saying, the steering knuckle is a kind of S shape, and you've got to thread it all together and get the caliper and the knuckle correctly sort of interlocked and then line up through the holes. And at first I was struggling with this a little bit because it seemed a bit awkward and I was working blind and things. What I ended up doing, and I don't know if this is the right way, but if people have got more experience and want to chime in, you're welcome to. What I ended up doing was using the upper inner bolt, the one up the back, to sort of peg this in place while I tried to maneuver the caliper in. That I think didn't work in the end, but what did work it kind of went together in the end, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was that I did. But I think what I did was I ended up threading the caliper and knuckle together and getting the top inner bolt through both of them, but then using the bolt that just goes through the caliper into the upright, and found that hole. So I knew the caliper was in the right place, and then it was just a case of sort of rotating it in and out of plane until I was able to get the top inner bolt in. A little bit of a pain, to be honest, but anyway, here we are. So I need to change all the brake fluid in the reservoir anyway. I think it's been there for quite some time, and although the car condition is quite good, I think it has suffered from a certain amount of neglect in terms of periodic maintenance. So in terms of mileage, the servicing's all there, but because this car sat dormant and unloved for the best part of 20 years, certain things weren't done except minimal recommissioning to be able to sell the car again. So I've no idea how old that brake fluid is, but it is a bit discoloured. So we're going to change it all. With that in mind, when I pushed the pistons back in to fit the new pads, I've got some original new old stock Lucas Girling pads, and they were only about £16 for the set, so I was quite pleased with that. I just opened the bleed nipple to push the old fluid out of the caliper, which means that I need to re-bleed it, but since I need to re-bleed the whole lot anyway, because I'll be doing the accumulator, that seemed fine, and there really seemed no sense in pushing old fluid back uphill. So there we are. I'm going to go and clean up these pins. These are the pins that came out of the caliper. They are a little bit bent. You'll also see that the R-clip has been sheared off on both of them. I suspect they've just been cut because they were stuck in the hole. So this isn't ideal. I think what I'm going to go and do is order some new ones, in fact, complete with the R-clips, and that's fine. But these have been in here since I've done 2,000 miles in the car, as I said in a previous video, since I got it, and they haven't fallen out. One of them had started to dislodge slightly, so far from ideal. But I don't intend to drive the car, but I do want to put it back together so I can move it around the driveway and move it out of the garage and things. So I'll get some of these ordered, but I'll put it back just now. And you don't need to really do much, to be honest, to be able to pull these out. I could probably even get them out with the wheel on. So I'll put them back in now, but I'll get the new pads lubricated, slot in, and then we'll check back in a minute. I've changed my mind. I realised it'll take me like 2 minutes to pillar drill through where those pins should be, and I can just make up some new R-clips from locking wire, and that's both quicker, cheaper, and ultimately safer. And I just get a solution that works and not something else I have to interfere with again. So we're going to do that. Well, those pins cleaned up quite nicely, actually. So the pads are in. They're lubricated with this Bosch stuff that I found quite a while ago. It works quite nicely, certainly better than using copper grease and things like that on brakes. So everything's in. The pads are in. I'll mention them in a second, actually. And the homemade R-clips are holding quite nicely. So all in all, probably saved myself a lot of time just by getting the pillar drill out of the corner and chasing the holes through. These new old stock discs, for £16, I think I paid for them, are absolutely superb. And I say that as someone who has spent a fortune on car brakes over many years, and it almost seems it doesn't really matter how good the brand is supposed to be with modern cars. The backing plates almost never fit the calipers without needing to be filed out around certain lugs so they actually slide in the carriers and things like that. I don't know how hard it can be just to get backing plates that actually fit, but these things just slipped in like they were meant for the calipers, funnily enough, because they are. Superb. Why can't they all be like that? Right. While my wife's behind the camera we did manage to get the accumulator off, so the old one's lying down on the floor, the new one's been fitted, and this means if you bring the camera around that we have to bleed the low side of the pump here. Because I want to run quite a lot of fluid out from the header tank over there in the reservoir, because it is old and you can see it's a bit discoloured, I'm just letting some run through. But what the manual says effectively is that you have to undo the little R clip here, pull the low pressure hose from the pump, and then just wait until fluid starts flowing, and then you're supposed to shove it back into the pump body whilst flowing. So I've got a little takeaway food dish here to try and avoid making as much of a mess as possible. I think it's inevitable we'll get some somewhere, so we'll just have to mop up and clean up afterwards. Right, my wife's had to go and do some mummy taxi stuff with kids again, so she's had to bail. But in that time, we got the low side back on. We drained quite a lot of fluid through. It was a bit on the sort of yellowish side, so I'm not sorry to see the back of that. We've put almost a litre of fresh fluid through the reservoir. That's now probably overfilled, if I'm honest, but it's okay, because what we haven't done yet is bleed through the high pressure side. So that has to be done furthest brakes first. So that will be the rear brakes, which have a single feed. The near side, the left-hand side, passenger side is the furthest. So we'll do that one first, then the other back. And although the motor's on this side, the valve body for the anti-lock brakes is on the driver's side. So then we'll do the passenger front and finally the driver front. And then we should have fresh fluid in the entire braking system, and that'll be quite nice. However, before we do that, while my wife's away, I'm going to get gloved up again, and I'm going to change the disc and pads on the driver's side front. Hello again. Another issue I've got with the XGS is the kickdown on the automatic gearbox. Now, if I can't fix this, it's not the end of the world, because I've always intended to change this, the TH400 3-speed automatic out for a 5-speed manual. But if I can get it working in the meantime, that would be good. I'm going to turn the camera around and show you what I've been trying to figure out, I suppose. Okay, here we are. I've disconnected this from the pedestal. This is the throttle pedestal here. This here is the throttle cable. If I twist this over, this here is the kickdown switch. Now, I showed you guys this before in a previous video. Now, what's supposed to happen is when the throttle pedal is pressed, the cable moves this direction down, and in here there is supposed to be a sliding intersection that's supposed to move back and forth, and it moves this roller up the ramp, and that should initiate kickdown. Now, mine's jammed. I don't know why it's jammed. I'm also struggling to find out what it's supposed to look like when it's working. If you see my hands getting glossy, that's because I've given this a good soak in 3-in-1. Now, what I have seen online is that this little screw holds the inner and the outer assemblies together. And the advice is that you can carefully remove that screw and it should come apart. So I'm going to give that a go and we'll see how we get on. Alright, with this screw out then, you can carefully pull this out against the spring. And you can see this in here. I have to be honest, it's not immediately obvious. Oh no, I think I know how it works actually. There's a second bump in here about that. But notwithstanding, I think it's reasonably clear from this that a spot of corrosion around there and on the other side I'd have to twist the throttle cable back on itself. Oh, balls. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. You're going to have to trust this, but I think what's causing this is a spot of corrosion here on the ferrule, and this is supposed to be able to move in and out of that tube a little bit. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a careful clean up and a little bit of a lubrication, and we'll reassemble it, and then we'll see if throttle opening from the pedal will activate the kickdown again. It'll be nice if it does. I do hope that you can see this because I'm rather pleased. Next time I drive this car, there should be some kickdown to play with. You know, sometimes I don't think good old-fashioned British engineering gets the international renown that it deserves. Brilliant.